Yes, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Swazi. You are locked in this evening for another quarantine question time hosted by My Life, My Say. This is the brand new space, a digital space for young people to come together and ask all the questions that you have got when it comes down to young people and politics. We're going to go live in about, I don't know, a minute or so. I know that the sign-ups this day, listen, there's like 800 people signed up, so we're going to give you guys time to grab your snacks, grab your drinks. I know the people are filling up as we go. So yeah, we're going to kick things off in about half a second or so. 30 seconds to go, and then we'll kick tonight off. Bring your questions. Tonight is promising to be a really, really good conversation. Hey guys, my name is Swazi. This is Quarantine Question Time, a brand new space for digital spaces for young people to come together and receive expert advice on issues that impact young people. This event is for young people, by young people, and yeah, we're in collaboration with the US Embassy, of course, talking all things US elections. And if you can see the panelists lined up for tonight, this conversation is gonna go off. If you've got questions about the US elections, please bring them. You'll be shooting them over to your panelists who will be able to give you some really great answers. So grab your drinks, grab your snacks. We're going to kick things off in less than a minute. So sit tight. We've got an exciting conversation coming your way. We're filling up close to 300 participants. Good evening, guys. I'm going to kick things off. My name is Swazi. You are watching right now Quarantine Question Time, hosted by My Life, My Say and myself in collaboration with the US Embassy. This is a brand new digital space for young people to receive expert advice on issues that impact young people. So bring your questions. This is the space for you to be. This event is held in partnership with the US Embassy in London to help educate, inform and encourage young people to gain a greater insight into the politics of the United States, including the culture, the people, and most importantly, the US and UK special relationship and shared values. My Life, My Say will be hosting these events between now and the election on the 4th of November. So please follow us on the socials, hit us up at My Life, My Say, and be part of the conversation by using the hashtag election2020. We use this hashtag to collect questions and comments. We want you guys to be as part of the conversation as much as the panelists too. So we're going to be following that hashtag for your live questions and comments during this event. We are pleased to have live subtitles available for this event and for future events. And if you would like to access them, just click on closed captions, which is usually at the bottom of your screen. We also will be joined by a British Sign Language interpreter. So if you do have any issues, please contact us in the chat bar as well. Before we kick off the event today, I would like to say hello and a huge welcome to Mete Koban, MBE, the CEO of My Life, My Say, to say a few words about tonight's event.
Thank you, Swazi, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today. We're very, very pleased on behalf of My Life, My Say to be welcoming you all to this very special event. I should just start by saying it's been a great past couple of weeks. We've been engaging with hundreds and thousands of young people from around the UK who are very passionate about what's happening in America, because we know that the special relationship between the UK and the US is extremely important in being able to tackle some of the biggest issues around the world, such as climate change, how we're going to respond to sort of the COVID crisis. And we're really pleased and proud as My Life, My Say to be partnering with the US Embassy here in London to really promote the US elections to young people here, because it's important that we understand why that relationship is specifically important. We've got an amazing lineup, Swazi.
I know.
When I look at the list, we've got two former Secretary of States here. We've got David Miliband, former Secretary of Foreign Secretary of the UK, again played an integral part of that special relationship, and is going to be joining us very shortly. We've got Secretary Chuck Hagel, who was the Secretary of Defense of the US. We've got Stephanie Young. She's doing an amazing job in America right now, getting people registered to vote through Michelle Obama's When We Will Vote campaign. We've got Marcus Roberts from YouGov. We've got Amy Dacey from the Sign Institute, American Sign Institute. We've got Ryan Williams, who used to be Mitt Romney's spokesperson. We've got Matt Makoviak, who again is really doing amazing work around some polling and some consultancy around that. Amazing panel, and we're really pleased and very grateful to them for their time here to be with us, because I know it's only we've got 1 week left, 5 days left, 6 days left, and for them to be giving up their time to be with us today, we're very honored. guys, please check us out over the next couple, 5-6 days. You know, my team is working really hard to make sure that we're putting out explainers for you around how the presidential election works, around the Electoral College, lots of different explainers. I know it's all sort of can be complicated for many of us, especially if we haven't really been involved in this area. So you can follow us at My Life, My Say. As I said, Swazi, massive thank you to you. You've been an amazing host. We've been doing this now since April. We've had nearly 30,000 people online through Zoom. That's mad. That's crazy. And, you know, we're doing amazing things. So hopefully we can continue to make sure that young people's voices are heard. The biggest, I guess, you know, the biggest concern we have as a charity here in the UK is that, you know, whilst we're having this digital connections, is obviously that young people's voices are again forgotten in decision making. And I think, you know, it's the job of organizations like My Life, My Say to make sure that our voices are heard in the political process. And this is just another way in which we're doing that. So I'm gonna shut up now. And thank you all again for joining us, and hope you all enjoy the event.
Thank you, Mete. Just to shout out Mete, you know, he always bigs me up as though I've paid him some good money to shout me out. But Mete, honestly, thank you for hosting these kind of sessions, because even for me, I don't know all the answers, and it's really, really good to chop up the conversation with so many incredible special guests. We have got a full house tonight. My name is Swazi. You are watching Quarantine Question Time in partnership with the US Embassy to unpack what it means, what is going on with the US elections. We've got some really incredible special guests. And so let me introduce you to them. I hope that everyone's camera is working, just because I want to say hi and wave. Hey, people are joining the screen. And so just a rundown. Mete has already given you a rundown, but as they are on the screen, looking gorgeous as ever, I want to say hi to Chuck Hagel, former Secretary of State for Defense under President Obama. I believe Chuck Hagel is with us this evening, but due to join in. David Miliband, hello, sir, former Foreign Secretary of the United Kingdom and CEO of International Rescue Committee. Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. I haven't been called gorgeous for a long time, so thank you very much.
You're on the right call then. You're on the right call this evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Ryan Williams, former spokesman for Mitt Romney. Hi, Ryan.
Sorry, I was muted. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you. I know this is Zoom. When we get back to real life and in-person events, we won't have this thing of mute. So yeah, Ryan, it's a joy to have you on the call. Amy Dacey, looking gorgeous as ever. Amy Dacey, Executive Director of the Sine Institute of Policy and Politics. Hi, Amy.
Hi, how are you? You're better than coffee, Swazi. I'm ready to go and fired up.
To go. Can I say your haircut as well? It's so gorgeous. It's so like, I wish I had the confidence to go for the big chop. We have got Stephanie Young's in the building, guys. Stephanie Young, Chief Officer of Culture and Communications at When We All Vote. Stephanie, welcome. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. And Amy is right. Your energy is getting me excited to talk.
And this is all before you guys have even spoken, you know, so I'm excited for this event. We've got Marcus Roberts in the building, Director of International Projects at YouGov. Hi.
Hey, Swazi, this is amazing. And it's super cool for me to get to be doing something with my ex-boss from the Democratic Party, Amy Dacey, and also my old friend Mete. So thanks so much for having me.
No, we are so glad to have you tonight. Thank you. We've got Matt Makoviak as well, former advisors to senators under the Bush administration. This is huge. Hi, Matt.
How you doing? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having the time to come and join us tonight. So yeah, if you've just joined in, these are your fantastic panelists this evening, and everyone has got some words, some gems, some real advice when it comes down to the US elections 2020. So as they all disappear, let me give you some of the ground rules, some of the just the outline of how tonight will work. This is Zoom, of course, until we can meet in person and do real life events. There are some functions at the bottom of your screen, and one of them being the raise your hand function. So throughout this event, we will be having opportunities to post your own comments or ask your own questions to the panelists. And in order to conduct this in a fair way to allow everyone the opportunity to speak, you will need to indicate by clicking the raise your hand function. And of course, we are jam-packed tonight. We've got so many incredible people, young people joining the call, touching 400 young people tonight. So we will do our best to collect as many questions and fire them through to your panelists as best as we can. There's also a function for the Q&A. So if you prefer not to speak, that's absolutely fine. You can write your question and type it in through the question box, and we will send that question over to the panelists so that you will be heard and your questions can get the answers from the people that you've thrown them to. So yeah, we welcome you. This is My Life, My Say. I'm Swazi. I'll be your host for the next couple, like 2 hours or so. We are chopping up all things US elections 2020, and we are so excited, so grateful to have a full lineup, a full house. So let us know in the question box, in the chat box, where you're calling in from. We've gone global, guys. We are global out here, as Zoom has allowed us to really connect with people all over the world. So we would love to know where you're dialing in from, where you're joining us tonight. This is a new digital space, a new platform for young people to receive expert advice when it comes down to the US elections 2020. So yeah, I'm going to kick things off next and hand over to someone who we're very grateful for his time. I'm going to introduce to you David Miliband. Oh my gosh, former UK Foreign Secretary, is now President though and CEO of the International Rescue Committee, who has a few words to share with us tonight. We're so grateful to have you. Hi, David.
Hey, Swazi, very good to be with you. As I said earlier, the International Rescue Committee is a non-governmental organization. We're a global humanitarian charity based in New York. We were founded in the 1930s by Albert Einstein, who was a refugee in America. And that tells you something important about America. It's been a country built by immigrants and refugees over 200 plus years. I've been living here since 2013, but obviously I'm still British. Let me just say three things and then looking forward to some questions. First of all, the election obviously matters to Americans, but it also matters to the world. That makes American elections different from other people's elections. Obviously, the first responsibility of government is to look after its own citizens, but there's a massive debate here about what role America should be playing in the wider world. And as the largest and most powerful democracy in the world, America plays an outsized role in the global balance of power. So this is globally relevant, not just locally relevant. We're not just interested in American politics because of their crazy campaigning and the mad money that goes through election campaigns. It's going to affect us all, wherever we live. Secondly, there are very big differences between the parties, probably bigger differences between the presidential candidates than in any presidential election for a very long time, probably since 1964. The positions staked out by President Trump and by former Vice President Biden are very different indeed. Vice President Biden came into the race at the age of 76 because he felt that the soul of America was being destroyed by the current president. You don't get a much bigger difference than that. And on issues ranging from climate change to the COVID crisis, to economic policy and tax, to race relations, the differences between the parties are very significant indeed. And on the global stage, President Trump has marked a decisive shift from the politics and the policies of previous administrations. He's pulled out of climate change agreements. He's withdrawn from the World Health Organization. He's turned his back on a range of international institutions and on many of the allies that have been close to the United States over the years. On the other hand, Vice President Biden, he says he doesn't want to restore the situation of 2016. He doesn't just want to go back to being the policies of President Obama, to whom he was the number two, but he says he wants to re-engage with the world, and he thinks that there's a room for American leadership and actually necessity for it. Final thing, just to kick off, and then looking forward to your questions. There's a big debate in the world about whether democracy works. It's been brought into very stark relief by the COVID crisis. If you listen to the Chinese government at the moment, they'll tell you that they're doing well on COVID because they don't mess around with elections or anything like that that can get in the way of decisive decision making. So democracy is on the ballot, and democracy is being debated here in a very big way. First of all, young people have historically not voted in the US, 61% total turnout at the last US election. It seems that many more young people are motivated to vote. There's voter suppression in this country because there are efforts underway to make it more difficult for people to vote. For example, limiting the number of ballot boxes. So there's a debate about the meaning of democracy here in the US, and that seems to me to make this an especially important election at a time when there is this global debate about what the best systems to run individual countries.
Thank you so much. Really, really insightful, and so grateful for just Yeah, everything that you are sharing. And I just want to know for young people locked in, and I see the chat box function going off. Young people really want to know, why is this such a crucial election for young people? Why should young people care?
Well, the answer to that is simple. They're going to live with the consequences, because although you've got a 72-year-old and a 77-year-old running for president, they're not going to be around for the next 50 years to live with the consequences. But young people are going to be. And I think it's very striking. People often say politics is short term, but the issues being debated are long term. And you couldn't get a much more long term issue than climate change. Carbon dioxide sits in the atmosphere for 100 years. It affects the whole planet. America has historically been the largest emitter. And there's a global economic race to make money out of taking carbon out of the atmosphere, out of decarbonizing, out of low carbon production. But also on issues of race, on issues of education, on issues of tax, young people are going to be living with the consequences. And that's why it always concerns me when young people don't vote. It's interesting, there may be some people from some young students on this from the US. I worry that they're messing around with some students at their university, some students not at their university, some students going back home for Thanksgiving already. You worry that they're not going to be on the right electoral register. And I hope that doesn't diminish turnout from young people, because they've got more at stake than the old. After all, we're going to be around for less long.
Yeah, that's a great answer. Yeah, even just do quick maths. It's true. Many of us will be around for the whatever comes of this election, right? So young people, thank you for asking that question. We've been unpacking a lot about the special relationship, and so someone is asking, what's your experience really? What's your experience of being the former foreign secretary and the special relationship? How does all of that work out on your side?
That's a great question. I was Secretary of State for Foreign and Commonwealth Affairs of the United Kingdom from 2007 to 2010. My opposite numbers were Condoleezza Rice, who was the first African-American woman to become a Secretary of State, and Hillary Clinton. So the second 18-month of my term as Foreign Secretary, my opposite number was Hillary Clinton. Now, America is a much more powerful country than the UK, but people talk about a special relationship because it's a partnership of values, it's a partnership of interests, it's also a partnership of insights. And I found that in my dealings with my opposite numbers in the US State Department, what they were interested in was what we knew and what we could bring to the table. And so when it came to relations with Pakistan, relations with Iran, relations also in Nigeria, there were major relations across the Middle East. Britain has interests and history and insights that were valuable. We're also willing to play on the international stage. We are one of the permanent members of the UN Security Council. We were, at the time I was Foreign Secretary, leading member of the European Union. And frankly, being in the European Union made us more relevant, more important to the US than out of the European Union. I know this isn't the purpose of this, and that die has been cast. But in my time, I can tell you that my American opposite numbers, they weren't just interested in the history and getting together for funerals and for birthday parties. They were interested in what we could do together on the international stage.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you so much to the person firing over that question as well. Please make use of the Q&A box. We've got really good conversation happening. Someone else has come through with a question. What are the biggest issues facing Americans in this election? If you were to pick 3 things, which would they be and why?
Number one, how they deal with COVID. At the moment, the health impact of COVID on the American people is one of the highest in the world, and the economic impact of COVID is one of the highest in the world. President Trump says that you can choose either to sort out your health problem or to protect your economy. The evidence is that on economics and on health, Americans are being hit very hard. So there's a very big COVID question at the heart of this election. Second issue, healthcare. It's incredible to British people that not everyone in America gets health coverage, even though 18%, almost $1 in 5 of total national income is spent on healthcare. The reason is that you can get the best healthcare in the world if you're willing to pay for it in America, but 50 million people don't have access to healthcare at all. And so that affects their economy as well as their society. I mean, at the time of when COVID arrived in March, Americans went back to work and spread the disease because they didn't dare take time off work because they wouldn't be covered for their health. So you've got major issues on health. Third domestic issue that I think is very important is a very difficult nexus around inequality and around racial inequality in particular, and the criminal justice system and the way it plays in that. The American Civil War was fought over 150 years ago now. It was fought over the rights of states in respect of slavery. But there's still many echoes of the debate about unresolved questions in respect of race in the United States, and those are on the ballot in various ways across the country. If I'm allowed one more thing to say,
Yeah.
I do think there's the 4 years of more years of President Trump, 4 years of Vice President Biden will mean a very different American role in the world. And so I think that this is a consequential election, not just for domestic reasons, but also for international ones.
Yeah, great answer. Thank you so much. So many questions. Hi to Richard locked in, hi to William as well. Joel's got a question. Do you believe that the divisiveness of this election will carry forward to the midterms in 2022 or the next election in 2024? Or is this a phenomenon driven primarily by President Trump?
Well, that's a very good question, because here's something frightening. Wednesday, November the 4th, next week, is the day after this year's presidential election. It's probably also the first day of the next presidential election, because they start campaigning as soon as they finish the last election.
So true.
And a lot of politicians are going to be thinking about what the implications of this presidential election are for the next one. I think the truth is that this is a very divided country. I first came to the United States in 1977 as a schoolboy. I lived outside Boston for a year with my parents. But this is a continent, not just a country. It's got 3 time zones. So it's divided in that way, but it's also divided urban, rural, north, south. It's divided on racial and other lines. And so the partisanship that has now been introduced has roiled around a set of issues that are real and are substantive. And what you've seen in the United States is a real warning for the UK. You can end up in a situation where 40% of the population watch one set of media, have one set of Facebook feeds, and another 40% of the population have another set of media and another set of Facebook feeds, and they never talk to each other. They've got a different set of facts, a different set of stories, a different set of personalities, a different set of truths. And when that happens, the 20% who actually want to have dialogue and persuasion, which is what democracy is meant to be about, get left out. In fact, that 20% has probably shrunk in the United States. And you really have to beware a country that can't talk, where people can't talk to each other, where they make assumptions about each other on the basis of what they look like, how they speak, where they come from. And so the danger is that the divisions run on. In the presidential debate last week, the last question was a very important one. The question was, how will you speak to the people who don't vote for you?
Right.
Vice President Biden gave a good answer, actually. He said something that many politicians in Britain, I think, would say, which is that I will be the representative of people whether they vote for me or not. But there's not much of that kind of inclusive politics around. And so if it was William who asked the question, there's a huge responsibility on the politicians, not just to go back into campaigning mode, into the mode of political killing, but to try to bridge divides. And I don't see much evidence of that at the moment, fueled by this media landscape where people talk to themselves, not to each other.
Yeah, I was going to ask you actually, do you find that this election is any different because we've been in a lockdown, we are in a global pandemic? How has COVID and how has the pandemic and being in lockdown, how has that affected or changed the election this year?
That's a good question as well. I think everyone's hypersensitive. We're all in danger of getting depressed because we're sitting in front of Zoom calls all day. We're not seeing our friends and family. You also can't have the door-to-door political engagement that is a feature of most politics. President Trump still has these rallies with people not wearing face masks. That's going to spread the virus, and so I think it has affected it quite a lot. But the biggest way is as follows: for those people, and I know this is not a political event. This is sponsored by the U.S. Embassy, so it's important that it's politically neutral. We're not here to say one side or the other. But I think that for those who support President Trump, his approach to COVID has exemplified why they support him, because he's willing to stick up 2 fingers to the medical establishment. But for those who oppose him, the way he's handled the crisis has epitomized what they can't stand about him. So the biggest impact of COVID has not, in my view, been on the mechanics of campaigning, although that's not to be sneezed at. It's actually been on the way in which it's framed. Sneezed at is a bit of an unfortunate pun in the context of COVID, but anyway, the most significant thing about COVID is that it's come to be the issue, the anvil on which divisions between the 2 parties are and the 2 candidates are seen. And the fact that one wears a face mask and the other doesn't has come to embody the decision. And that seems to be driving the votes at the moment. The polls are showing that in the Midwest of the country, where the rates of COVID are rising the fastest, you're getting a late shift towards Vice President Biden. So if so, then COVID will be pretty significant.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got Mete ready to ask a question, but before I jump to you, Mete, I just want to speak to the issue of race, really. And we've spoken a lot about division, and that's quite a sad thing to really speak about, given that it's the United States. There should be a unity, and so between the two candidates, then, what hope do you have for uniting people, especially on the issue of race? How can Black people be losing their lives in a pandemic against the backdrop of COVID, and yet some of the most, equal things, the most obvious ways that we should be united, that isn't set yet? So between Trump, Biden, what do you think? Who is going to get United States to be in the quickest united continent, as you say?
Well, I think that as a British white man, who's, I'm afraid to say, 55 years old, I need to cede the ground on that question to some of your American interviewees who will be able to speak to this in a much more insightful way, because they'll have lived for their lives the experience of being white or Black or brown in America. And so I wouldn't want to speak for them. Where I can say something which I think is interesting is that the organization that I lead, the International Rescue Committee, helps people whose lives are shattered by conflict and disaster around the world. But we're also the largest refugee resettlement agency in America. And America has been the country that has welcomed more refugees historically than any other. It's also been a country where the right, as well as the left, have welcomed refugees. So President Reagan, who was a Republican president in the 1980s, he welcomed more refugees to America than any other president. President Trump has deviated from that, and he's reduced the number of refugees coming into America before COVID by about 85%. And so I've got a perspective on these issues of race and ethnicity and how they play out in a couple of ways. One is that I see people who've escaped from war around the world, and they become patriotic and productive Americans. They come and they know the value of freedom, and they put their life and soul and that of their kids into this country. I've also seen that how America goes can affect the rest of the world. When America demonizes refugees, that's copied elsewhere. And there are debates about the refugee issue around the world that mimic American debates in some ways. And that's not an exact proxy for the issue of race, but it relates to it. And so I hope that whoever is elected on next Tuesday, and hopefully it will be next Tuesday and it won't go on for a month afterwards and end up in the courts, I hope that they realize that one of the special elements of this country has been that it's founded on an ideal of equality. Even if it hasn't lived up to it always, it's founded on that ideal. And it's also founded on the ideal that if you qualify, you should be allowed to make your life here. And so that's, I think, an important ideal to hold on to. But I think when it comes to speaking about race and criminal justice and education and discrimination, you're better off talking to some of the Americans who will have a far greater insight than I will.
Yeah, no, definitely. That question I'll hold on to and fire over to the other panelists as well. I'm going to bring Mete in on the conversation. Mete, I know you've got a question.
Yeah, David, thank you so much again for joining us. I had a question for you. I mean, obviously, I think for a lot of us, and particularly for my generation and younger generations, there's just a lot happening around the world right now with, COVID. I mean, if you're living in the UK, Brexit is happening, and obviously how that's going to change the fundamental relationship between the UK and the rest of the world. Obviously, America's going through a very different period as well. I just wonder, what impact do you think, like we potentially might leave the European Union with no deal in a couple of weeks' time or a couple of months' time? And I just wonder how would that impact the relationship between the UK and the US, particularly given sort of drawing up on some of your experiences around sort of the UK being a bridge for the US to Europe?
Well, I'm afraid it's not a happy picture, because the simple answer is that, in my experience, it'll make us weaker. It'll make Britain less relevant. Americans are interested in Britain. They like to work with Britain, but they follow the power. And by withdrawing from the European Union, we've reduced our power. And so there's no question in my mind that Berlin and Paris and Brussels will be critical power centers for the Biden administration when it thinks about policy towards climate, policy towards COVID, policy towards the Middle East, policy towards Africa. That doesn't mean Britain's irrelevant, but I don't want us to be outside the room knocking on the door. And so I think it's very important that the trade negotiations that you just referenced, they've not succeeded on trade, but they've also not succeeded on foreign policy, political cooperation, security policy, intelligence, where Britain has intelligence relations, where Britain has strengths. And so I think that there is a real urgency for the UK to get its act together. Otherwise, we will find ourselves outside the room. There's a part of the, you remember that song in Hamilton, The Room Where It Happened? Well, the danger is that we're not in the room where it happened.
Thank you.
And how do you think we can get that message across to sort of like, you know, to young people here? Because I think one of the things that we're trying to achieve with this project really is to try to get, you know, young people from the UK and also from the US who may have shared interests and think about how they can work together collectively. Because that's, you know, when you've spoken rightly so about some of the big issues that we're facing around the world, you know, we've been able to tackle some of them in the past through the partnership between the UK and US. And how can we, you know, I guess, inspire young Brits and young Americans who may not necessarily understand the importance of the special relationship that we've had in the same historical context to sort of apply that to today's world?
I would say don't try and recreate old relationships, start new ones, which means including the rest of the world, not excluding them. Don't see the Anglo-American relationship to the exclusion of Europe or the exclusion of the Middle East or the exclusion of Africa. See it at the African continent, see it together. And I think that there's a real need for some leadership that can be shown by British young people, actually, in showing that Britain might be leaving the European Union because of the votes of those over the age of 45, but that British young people recognize that this is a connected world. And you want to be connected to people in other parts of the world. You want to be problem solvers with people in other parts of the world. My organization hires people across the world, and we do so because we want to represent the places that we work. And so I think for British people, whatever sphere of life they want to go into while they're students, but also if they go into whatever profession they pursue, I think make the links and don't try and make the Anglo-American links exclusive, make them inclusive.
Great advice. We've only got 5 minutes left, so I need to squeeze in as many questions with you as possible. As you said, we've got students on the call. We've got a lot of young people on the call, many of whom are like, yeah, I care about this issue, but I don't know how to get into politics. And so let me cast your mind back to a young David. Let me throw you all the way back to your youth, really.
I still think I'm young.
Yeah, still very young, of course, very young, but just younger.
I haven't noticed that I've got old.
We're going younger. How did you start? What were the starting points for you? For anyone watching thinking, yeah, I really am passionate about some of these topics, but I don't know where to begin. What advice would you give? I
mean, the start for me was really at university, I think. And that's where I got involved with the Labour Party. It taught me a lot and I was able to follow my interests. I was incredibly stupid in my choice of A-levels. I did physics and maths for A-level, absolutely total dead end for me. I mean, I think it's great that if people are good at physics and maths. I was terrible at physics and maths, but I found my interests in studies alongside the chance I had to then participate in politics. I learned from the ground up in politics. I learned so much that I then went into public policy in a think tank. And I think that the big advice I give to people who ask me is don't think about going into politics, think about doing something, and then politics will find you or you'll find politics. And if you're too calculating about it, it won't work. But go and make change, because politics is about making change. And so figure out what you care about, figure out your point of view, and then figure out how you're going to be able to make change. And if it's right, it'll lead you into local politics. If in fact it's better that you go into an NGO, or better that you go into the private sector, or better that you go into academia, you'll do that. But I think that you've got to start not with I want to go into politics, you've got to start with I want to make change and contribute to a better community, whether locally or globally. And I probably wish I'd followed that advice myself when I started off.
That's a great answer, you know, because so many of us do want to make change. And just encourage anyone, young person just locked in, what are the skills that you have? What are you really good at that you can lend to charities or other businesses and really make full use of your skill set? And my last question really has to be around social media. Loads of young people are of course on socials, and this is for, you know, this is a digital space. We've had to move online because of the pandemic and we can't do things the way we used to in real life. And so my question to you is, number one, what's your favorite social platform? Do you have a social platform that you particularly prefer? And what has the role of social media played in terms of politics and making a difference, but particularly now for the US 2020 elections?
Well, I probably use Twitter more than any other platform. I don't have as many followers as President Trump, although I probably got fewer bots than he has following me. Look, I think there's a really big thing here because social media has the power to connect, but it also has the power to destroy. I mean, you know how many young people get destroyed by vicious things that are said by schoolmates or even friends on social media. Social media can be exclusive, not inclusive. And at the moment, the power of social media to destroy is greater than the power of social media to create. And I think it's our responsibility to curb that sense that because social media gives distance and anonymity, it allows for viciousness and destruction. And by pulling us apart from each other, it's allowed for the algorithms to actually sponsor hatred rather than to sponsor quote unquote love. And that is a really serious issue that we all face. It's not just that terrorists use social media. Actually, the intelligence agencies have got pretty smart about how to block that. But we've all got a responsibility about how social media is used to construct conversation with people who we don't agree with, not just people who we agree with. And the great danger is that we all put on someone that we're following, that we reduce ourselves into a tiny little cave of people who are exactly like us. We've got to open up the shutters. And so my big advice in any walk of life, whether you're going into business or politics or whatever, if you think you no longer need to listen, you're going to fall flat on your face. The moment you think, I don't need to listen, I've got nothing to learn, I know more than anyone else, you've had it, because the world will overtake you. And I think that's the really important thing, where there's a responsibility on the social media companies, but there's also responsibility on regulators. The public service broadcasting ideal about information and facts that allows people then to make their own opinions is really important. Because at the moment, on social media, there's no difference between a fact and an opinion. And that is a very dangerous way to go.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, what you said there about responsibility, inclusivity, also division as well. You know, we must be so careful on social media. But you said the power to connect, which is what we've been able to do tonight, right? And this is really fun. This is really just a new way of working, and to get people's voices in our conversations at different time zones and everything has been really, really special. David, thank you so much for your time, for your contributions. We've loved having you tonight. Thank you.
That's really kind. Good luck with the rest of it, Swazi. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care. Take care. You're watching My Life, My Say. My name is Swazi, hosted by My Life, My Say in collaboration with the US Embassy, talking all things US elections 2020. We've got a full house tonight. You've just heard from David Miliband, and now I'm about to bring you in with Ryan Williams. Hi, Ryan. How are you? Let me know you're there.
Very good.
Hey, how are you?
Very good.
Good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I know you prepared your few words to share with us, so the floor is all yours. Thank you so much.
Well, sure. We're in the final week here of the campaign. There's a lot at stake in this election. I think there's a cliche every 4 years. This is the most important election of our lifetimes. I think there's a case to be made for this one, not just for the presidential election, but for the down ballot races too. Of course, we have the entire U.S. House of Representatives up this year. And then a significant amount of the United States Senate. Senators serve 6-year terms, and they're up every 2 years, a third of the Senate's up. The group that's up this year could actually swing control of the United States Senate, which could give either President Biden or second-term Trump administration a different Washington to deal with. The Republican Senate on a Biden administration would be a different outcome, certainly, than having Trump, keeping the Senate. So there's a lot more at stake here than just the presidential election. But the presidential election, as your previous guest mentioned, really features two candidates who have some of the sharpest policy differences in recent memory. Donald Trump is not a typical politician. That is part of the reason why he won in 2016. After years of career politicians, people who had come up with the system, he was an outsider who ran as someone different, and he certainly has been different. Joe Biden is much more of a conventional politician, but someone who views America's place in the world in a more traditional American sense, being a power abroad, playing on the international stage, whereas Donald Trump has promoted an America First agenda, which focuses mostly on things happening in the country and withdrawing from key international agreements like the Iran deal, Paris Accords, other things that were agreed upon by previous administrations, breaking with precedent and kind of just pulling out versus trying to renegotiate them, and basically just pulling back from the world. He's pulled our troops, our assistance out of Turkey, where we were trying to help allied fighters there. He's pushed hard to pull our troops out of Afghanistan, troops that were put there by another Republican president, George Bush. So there's a different global outlook that affects not just Americans, that affects people all over the world. At home, the differences are quite stark as well. The president talks about, the biggest issue right now, of course, here and around the world is the recovery from the COVID pandemic. You can look at the two economic plans that both candidates have put forward and get a pretty stark difference between the two. You've got President Trump talking about tax cuts, incentivizing businesses, Vice President Biden talking about infrastructure spending and a big spending package to try to stimulate the economy. So we're facing two very different futures for the country and paths, not just for whoever wins the presidential election, but for the down ballot races. And, we're in this final week, and having worked on campaigns, this is kind of the crunch time where voters who are in the middle, who haven't made up their mind, and there are some, despite the fact that I think most people have seen Donald Trump in action at this point and know if they want him or not for 4 more years, they're making up their minds. And while Joe Biden does have a very large lead in some of the public opinion polls, there will be some tightening. He clearly is in a position, you want to be ahead heading into the final week. But as voters decide, who haven't already voted early, who are making that final decision, this is a critical week that will really determine the outcome of the election. Hopefully we'll get a result on election night versus a long drawn out process challenging the results, because that's not a process that's good for the country or good for the world. So we'll have to see what will happen, but there's a lot at stake. The choices are very stark. And, I think we're going to see pretty high turnout this year, probably higher than we saw 4 years ago, given the intense interest in this election. So I want to leave time now to take questions from everybody on what's up for the election. And of course, having been in 3 of them actually, what to expect and kind of what I've seen working on campaigns and what you could expect to see over this final stretch period.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you. I guess, just like you said, you've been doing campaigns. Do you know what I mean? You're not new to this at all. And you really have worked at the highest level of politics and public relations. And so for seeing the response from young people, are you seeing any similarities or any differences? Has 2020 been a complete new year that you thought, oh my gosh, this is brand new? Or are there similarities between previous campaigns that you've worked on?
This is the weirdest election cycle ever because of the COVID pandemic. Usually at this time in the race, you'd have a lot, you would have had months and months of rallies and events. You'd have packed campaign offices in key states across the country, people in person doing phone banking, sending out yard signs, doing this kind of final push, the ground game, if you will, of the campaign. That's not happening this year. It's happening at a much smaller degree because of the pandemic. You're not seeing these big, well, at least you're seeing some big Trump rallies. You're not seeing as many on the Biden side, but the actual ground game, the volunteers coming in to push for their candidate, it's being done in a different way. People are doing phone banking from their homes. They're being given call sheets. They're voting earlier in greater numbers this time. So this is just a very odd campaign. I also have some friends on both campaigns. I know my friends in the Biden campaign, they haven't been to their office in months because of the pandemic. When you work on these campaigns, usually you're at your desk until 4 a.m. every day, heading into the final stretch of a campaign. So it's just a very odd time, and it's a very strange campaign. As far as young people go, traditionally young people don't vote in big numbers. I do think you're seeing some more energy this time around, and I do think there's more. States have taken steps, some states at least, to provide more opportunity for early voting and mail-in voting than we had 4 years ago. I do think some young people will take advantage of that, but I don't think we'll quite know to what extent they turned out till after the election. But there does seem to be, given how in focus politics has been the last 4 years, whether you like Donald Trump or don't like Donald Trump, he certainly has brought a lot of eyeballs to the day-to-day workings of government, whereas before, under more conventional presidents, you didn't really pay as much attention to politics. There's been a greater focus on politics over the last 4 years, and we'll see if that translates into more young people deciding to take the effort to go vote, whether it's early or by mail or at the ballot box on election day.
Thank you. And yeah, so many people locked in. I know that would have been a really, really helpful answer. So thank you for that. Irene, I've seen your question. I'm coming to you, Irene. But first, I just want to understand more about the Electoral College and how the election system works. So I wondered if, like, in a nutshell, really, just before we get into how young people, how does it work? How can they vote? Yeah, tell us a little bit more about the Electoral College and how the elections work.
Well, we're a republic, not a pure democracy. So the way our system has been set up since the founding of the country and the Constitution is a presidential election by Electoral College. And that's not a popular vote. So the way it works is people vote and they vote in their state, and based on the result of their state, if a state is won, there are a certain amount of electoral votes that are given to each state, and that the allotment of votes is based upon population and representation in Congress. So a smaller state is going to get less electoral votes than, say, a bigger state like Texas. And after the votes have been counted, the Electoral College meets, I think it's January, based on how their states voted, and they cast ballots that will choose the next president. You need 270 votes to win. Most states, gets a little confusing. Most states are done based upon the result of the entire state. So if everybody, if Donald Trump gets 52% in Florida, he gets all the electoral votes in Florida. There are very few states that actually allocate those votes by congressional districts. So the state of Maine and the state of Nebraska allocate Electoral College votes by congressional districts. So what you can see sometimes in a place like Maine is that Trump could potentially pick up some votes there, even if the other district and the state as a whole go for Biden. He could potentially pick up electoral votes in the second congressional district that leans more Republican. Those are kind of anomalies. It's basically the system's based upon the way our country's founded, which our states have rights, so they have a right to set their process for how they vote for president. So it's not how everybody votes. It's how your state votes, and the electors in the college you send to Washington in January, how they vote at the end of the day based on what they've seen from the people in that state. It's a little confusing, but I hope that was a quick answer for you.
No, that's perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to shoot you Irene's question. Hi to Irene, who's locked in. Thank you so much for your question. She's asking, how can we motivate young voters to go to the polls? And just to add to Irene's question, really, we know the influence, we know the power that young people hold. And so is there anything that has been done already that's been effective for young people that you think, actually, maybe us in the UK, we can try that as well? But yeah, how can we motivate young people to go to the polls?
I think it's delivering the message through ways that young people pay attention. Putting up, sending out a mailer urging people to vote in the mail. I don't think that's very effective to reach young people. But what I think you are seeing this year, at least in the United States, is if you log on to Facebook, you log on to Instagram, other social media channels, you're being bombarded today with messages urging you to vote, directing you towards, where to sign up to vote, you can vote early. I think that's an effective way to reach young people. Of course, young people pay attention to influencers and celebrities and more so than politicians. Having them deliver the message, I think, can be more effective than doing it the old-fashioned way. We're not taking out newspaper ads anymore to urge people to do things. It's reaching voters, younger voters, in ways they pay attention to and providing them with the resources that they need, making it easy to vote. Where is my polling precinct? What days can I go vote early? What are the laws in my state? Because elections are different. And the way that elections are administered are different in every state. So your friend in California may have a different way to vote than you do as a resident of Alabama. So providing that message and the information through the channels that young people pay attention to, I think, is key to increasing young people's participations in our elections.
Yeah, Thank you. We've got 5 minutes left. I'm trying to squeeze in as many questions. Hi to Mark, who's locked in. Mark got a question for you. He says, if your aim has always been to cross the pond and work in US politics, what is the best way to do this? And where are the best places to look? Party or committees, campaigning firms, etc. Yeah, Mark, if Mark wants to go from the UK to the US, what's his best way to get there?
Look, campaigns are always looking for good people. The best way to start is just to get in them. I started out in campaigns when I was in college, and I walked into a campaign one day and said, I want to work here. And they said, okay, great. We need help, licking envelopes. And I said, okay. So I did that and then worked my way into communications and made a career out of it. Campaigns need volunteers to work and power the campaign. They can't pay everybody, to put yard signs up and other things. It's an opportunity to get your foot in the door and then prove that you're, someone who is an effective worker. And you can work your way up very quickly in politics, because people don't stay in politics that long. They generally do it in their 20s, 30s, early 40s. It's a very grueling schedule. And then once they've been in politics, they either go into government or they go out of government into the private sector. So there's a real opportunity for young people to get involved. And my piece of advice would be just get here, figure out, which side you're on. You really can't go back and forth. So if you're on the Democratic side, work for Democrats. If you're on the Republican side, work for Republicans. Volunteer your time, go into the campaigns, make dials, meet the people, and then kind of work your way in. The political universe, people who work in politics, it's very small. So people you meet on one campaign, you'll be working on a campaign, 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So you'll make great relationships getting involved for a candidate of your choosing.
Thank you. And my last question, and yeah, thank you, Mark. I mean, I don't know if there's any movement really in a pandemic at the moment, so use online as well, like you said, Ryan, but there's so much online. Social media is a great place at the moment to link and connect people and to keep the conversation going. My last question really has to draw upon your experience of all the kind of elections that you've seen in your time. And so, yeah, just want to know, why is this particular election really important, and is it the most important that we've seen?
I think it is. I just think there's such a chasm between the two candidates this time around, not just on policy, but in style as well. Trump is, whether you like him or dislike him, he is a unique politician. We've never seen anybody like him before hold office in this country, really, in generations. And Biden is more of what you'd expect from a politician, someone who's probably not going to be as active on Twitter, who's maybe going to have a more methodical process than Trump does, who generally kind of believes in his own instincts and goes with them. So I think it is the most consequential election in our lifetime, because the differences are so vast between the two candidates, on not just domestic policy, but on foreign policy. So whoever wins, we're either going to continue in one direction or we're going to go in the complete opposite direction. And if Democrats were to take back the White House and the Senate, they can get a lot of big things, through the Congress. The pendulum in this country tends to swing. It goes one way and then it comes back. It went one way with Obama as president. It's gone way back the other way with Trump. And given that it's gone way back, it may go way back the other way if Democrats were to take over complete control of Washington.
That's actually really, really insightful. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for your questions. Ryan, you've been a joy. Thank you so much for your time and your contributions. We've really loved having you tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. All the best. Take care. I'm going to bring in next someone whom I'm very excited to speak to. Amy Dacey's in the building. Amy is the Executive Director of the Sine Institute of Policy and Politics, and she's joining us tonight. There she is. Hi, Amy.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Great to be here.
We are so thankful to have you this evening. The floor is all yours. Thank you so much for putting your contributions. We would love to hear from you.
Yeah, just some thoughts to share. Voters are voting and have been voting, for a while in the United States. In the United States, it's not just about one day. It's not just about November 3rd. And I think the work that Stephanie's doing, with When We All Vote, so important, because everybody in the United States doesn't need to just say they're going to vote. They have to have a plan to vote. Yeah. Just to remind some of the people that are on tonight, there's 50 different states that are administered in different ways. So this is so important to know what your plan is, to know how you register, how you decide to vote, if you're going to vote by mail, if you're going to certainly, vote in person, or if you're going to use one of the drop-off boxes. So for us in the United States, it's so important to have that plan. I haven't checked my phone in the last 5 minutes. So as far as I know, 79 million people have voted so far, early vote in the United States. This is huge. This is, at this point it was 57 million in 2016. So we're seeing this large influx of people voting in person and by mail. Yes, we are in the middle of a global pandemic. We are in the middle of a financial crisis. You can see people making decisions, trying to vote early. But I do think you've also seen 342% increase in young people ages 18 to 30 of, early voting compared to 2016. So these are 66% new voters. So the hope is that we're going to have a really high turnout. I do think that there's going to be a lot of people turning out, on election day as well. But 30 states have had a higher percentage of voter turnout so far at this point than in 2016. I will say, I agree with Ryan, since I was 8 years old, I've been working on campaigns. It's hard to believe, but it's like my parents told me like all kids were working on campaigns. And so, I believed them. And so I was out there dropping lit and doing everything. And it might seem cliche, but this is the most important of our election of our lifetime. Yes, until the next election. But I do think it's unique and I do think it's different. I also think that it's so important, for outreach to youth voters, because we've also seen when young people vote early, they will vote consistently and vote in elections. This is literally about creating a culture, creating an idea, in them that that's something that they need to do. And every election is important. I'm sure we're going to talk a lot tonight about the national election. It's certainly, on everybody's mind. I've worked on elections, local elections, state elections. I've worked on presidential elections. Every election does count. And so literally in these places where people are voting, they're going to decide who their, statewide elected officials are. They're going to decide who's running, for Congress and Senate in those states and local elected officials. And one thing that I do think why we have such a high turnout too, I think COVID has really helped us understand two things: how important local government is to us. I've watched my local news probably more than I have in any time in my life, because I'm looking to my mayor to find out, what do I need to know? What do I need to do? But I also think it's helped us to understand how important it is to have international relations and how important it is that things don't stop at our borders. Like, we are all interconnected in a lot of ways. And so I think those are things that are really bringing, people to the forefront. I do think that we'll know a lot of information on election day, and we need to be prepared that we might not know everything on election day. And we might need a couple days to vote, to count the votes. To me, the most important thing is this process that every vote cast is counted. And if that takes a couple of days, we all need to take a breath and to be able to do that. And some states, like I said, there's different systems. Some states, have already started counting votes. And so they'll count election day votes, on election day. Some won't get to count until election day. And as we kind of, it's always hard in the United States. You start out in the East Coast and the polls close as you go across the country and you're like, okay, Pennsylvania, and okay, so each national candidate does have a path with the Electoral, college. But it's important. Those votes will need, to be counted. A lot of these races, you've seen things at stake. And as an operative, you can feel, compassion for fellow operatives, because it is a chance, to like make sure that people understand it is a very different, conversation with voters. Like, campaigns for as long as I've been doing them are just conversations with voters. Well, this year the conversation's challenging, right? Because you don't have all those tools that are in your toolbox. You don't have sometimes that in-person voter contact. But what I know is that the way you get young people engaged is a couple of ways for sure. It's having peer-to-peer conversations. Like, if you voted and you're a young person, go get your friends to vote. They're going to listen to you. Like, I mean, that's somebody that they're going to, find interested about why you voted, what the things are. So having those peer-to-peer conversations are incredibly important to do that, knowing what's at stake. And then I think there's a really important thing that we have to do in this country. More people, young people will get involved when there's younger people running for office, when there's younger people running campaigns and advocacy groups and doing the work, out there. I think having more people in those roles will only inspire young people to get involved. And you can make change from inside the system with public service, or you can do that from outside with advocacy and campaigns, but you can do both. And the big thing is to also, remind everybody that campaigns are about differences. They are about contrast, and candidates, have to show the differences and how they'll lead. But again, governing is about consensus. So what we do after the election, coming together, who's the leader who's going to listen to expert advice, bring people together and have the conversations moving forward. And I think that can be inspiring to young people as well.
Wow. Pow wow. This TED Talk, I need to save it. I need to... I'm coming back to this conversation. That's just so amazing to hear from you. Thank you. And so many questions coming up. Tim has asked a really good question about how do young Americans feel. But before I jump over to Tim's question, I just want to ask you, because you've called the election unique, and I do agree. I think it's a very unique election. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Us in the UK, we're watching the US, we're seeing the Black Lives Matter protests happening. There's a lot of things going on at the same time. And your statistics around young people and a higher number of young people voting is encouraging, right? So is there one thing that you think, young people have come out because of this reason, or has it been a combination of so much happening at the same time?
I think that, organizations that are helping people understand the process, to educate them on doing this, to encourage them to do this. Certainly the work, like I mentioned, that Stephanie's doing when we all vote, and getting people to say, this is important. This is the process, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a Republican, whether you're an independent, it's important. I also think that candidates are doing a really good job of saying what's at stake. And I think it was David who was saying that, like, the decisions that public officials make affect your life. Politics is personal. And I think too often we were raised to say, don't talk about politics, but politics is personal. Decisions that are made in public office affect your life. And I think sharing that information, making sure that young people know how much of an influence that is, whether that's education opportunities and costs, whether that's how are you going to take care, of your family in the future, social justice issues that are so important, the environment. I think that's one of the other issues I would add to David's list too, is like, decisions that are being made about the environment and how we, young people see this is not only something they care about now, it's something they care about for the future. So I also think that, again, I agree with some of my colleagues, like, you have to go and have the conversation where people are already having the conversation. So finding the means, whether it's on social media platforms or in organizations or groups, or like I said, peer to peer, you have to go and have the conversations where people are having them and where they're going to hear them.
Yeah, thank you, which I hope is why young people are here tonight. My life, my say, is for me as well. I didn't have a political background. I just landed volunteering work, and I was like, where are these conversations? And so, you make a great point to go where the conversations are already being had. Let me ask you Tim's question. Hi, so Tim locked in. He says, how do young Americans feel today? That's a brilliant question.
Oh, I think that there's a lot, going on. And I think we have to ask the question, and certainly pollsters are reaching out, organizations are reaching out, campaigns are having direct conversations with young people, not only on their campaign, but out on the trail. I think from the people I've talked to, certainly the information I've seen, there's a lot of anxiety out there, and angst. And so how do we reassure and be hopeful and aspirational while we're still very transparent and honest about the challenges that we're facing? And I think that any candidate that has that conversation, and is transparent and is authentic, that is why, that's what young people are thinking about, feeling about, connecting with that. So, I think a lot of these issues are happening. You see, whether you're a very young student, if you've decided to go to college, if you're taking a year off, like, this pandemic's affected us all in a lot of ways, and the decisions that we're making and the decisions for our future. And so I think that's something, that anxiety, that we have to talk to and make hope and aspiration to say that there are solutions and plans for these problems, but be very honest about what we're facing.
Yeah, the two words there, transparency and being authentic. Those two in politics, I think, are so huge and so key.
Important.
Really, really important, because you want to know that someone's being honest with you. You want to know what's at stake, and hopefully that will drive young people to vote. Absolutely. We wanted to get you on this call because you've just got tons and tons of experience. So I just wanted to ask you really and open up this can of worms about your experience working as the chief executive at the Democratic National Committee during Barack Obama's time. This is pretty huge. So what was that experience like, and how has that fed into the work you've gone on to do?
Listen, it was an incredible honor to lead, the party and under the leadership of President Obama. It was a challenging time. We were, low in resources. We had to do some rebuilding. It was during, midterms that didn't, go as well for the Democratic Party. But I think for me, that's the other thing that we don't always talk about in the United States is connecting young people to party politics. We're still like, for the most part, a two-party system. Parties do make decisions in primary, elections. And it's these winners of the primary elections that definitely go on in the general. So if you want to see people that share your values, share your interests, you have to get involved in party politics. So a lot of that was trying to do work to engage young people to become involved in, the party, or to register with the party so that you could make decisions in some of these primary, challenges. I think in a lot of ways, it was working with state parties, it was working across the country, and it was understanding that it was an honor to work for a party that I think, shared a lot of, and respected a lot of different views, and also was a big tent party that brought in a lot of different, parts of the country and different, race, gender, sexual preference, all these things like together to have that conversation. So, and it was challenging. There was some real challenges, at the time. Like I said, elections are about differences, and that even goes with, primary elections. But I think getting young people involved at an early age, involved in politics, knowing that it's personal. I learned a lot at the party for sure. And, there was so many challenges we were facing as a country then as well. And then helping the party to move that forward was definitely a challenge.
Yeah. And shouts to your parents, if you're out here from 8 years old.
That's right.
Yeah.
I didn't know any better. What are you going to do? But I thank them now.
I love that. Like, every 8-year-old is doing this. And so why would you know any different? But for a lot of young people, I suppose it starts early because, like you said, politics feeds into personal life. There is that sort of attachment. And so for young people here in the UK, this is a big question that is coming out of this event.
Right.
It's kind of like, that's happening over in America. That's got nothing to do with me. I'm not voting. Why should I care? So we've heard from other panelists, but for you, Amy, why is it that young people here in the UK really need to care about this election? Why is it important to them?
Yeah, I think we get the government that, we deserve in some ways, because if we don't vote, if we don't engage, if we don't make those decisions, we're not going to get the people that represent us and share our values, in office. And elections do matter. Elections have consequences. And I think the other thing is sometimes we even think that because there's more attention to some of them, they matter more. But like I said early on, like these local races, there's decisions being made every day by mayors and governors and state legislatures about this COVID, crisis and what's happening. So I think, the important thing is to know that they are making those decisions. But here's the other thing, public officials work for you. So you get to decide who's working for you and who's making these decisions. And you can use your voice, and make them accountable. The other job is it's electing them and getting them into office, but then it's also holding them accountable when they're there. I think those two things are very, very important to be good, citizens, a part of the process and to really make an impact.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Lucy's jumped in the chat as well. Says, question for Amy. Why does the US have a transition period between the election results and the inauguration? In the UK, it's obviously a lot different, but what happens during this period? Yeah, great question. It's
a great question. And I have to say, as an operative, I was actually over during one of the elections in the UK, and I was like, wait, there's a car going over to Buckingham Palace and it's done, So I think that's important. Ryan brought up some of this, with talking about the Electoral College. What will happen is states will certify their individual elections, and these electors that are then, decided and certified from the Electoral College, they will meet in December. I think it's December 14th, and they will vote for the President of the United States. And then January 6th, our Congress will certify that election. They will see if there's any challenges. They will, make sure, and then they will certify that election. And then you have the inauguration a little time after. So, again, votes will still be counting on election day and maybe a few, days after, but then those individual states have to certify. It goes to the electors where they make that vote. They, often go in line, with, and are expected to go in line with the decision of the state. And then in January 6th, you have the Congress certify. So it's a great question, but that's why there's this lag time. There's still some parts of the process.
Yeah, amazing. And just on time, Secretary Chuck Hagel has just joined the call, so we're going to jump in. Amy, thank you
Thank you so much. Thank you. Hello, Secretary Hagel. How are you? Take care. Thank you.
Good. How are you?
Good.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you so, so much. You're watching Question Time, Quarantine Question Time with me, Swazi, hosted by My Life, My Say, in partnership with the US Embassy. And we have the one and only Secretary Chuck Hagel's in the building. Hi, how are you?
Just dandy. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I'm good because we've caught up already in lockdown. And so this is part 2 of all of the fun. How's your day been?
Well, busy, but that's okay. That's better than the alternative.
That's amazing. We're so grateful to have you join us. Former Secretary of State for Defense under President Obama. We are so, so thankful to have you, Chuck Hagel. I know you've prepared a few words for us tonight, and then we're going to shoot over some questions from the young people. So the floor is all yours.
Well, let me ask you this, because I don't want to waste people's time, and I look forward to the questions. What do you want me to talk about?
I think really what the questions that have been the most common over this series is why should young people in the UK care about an election that's happening in the US? What has that got to do with me? Why should I matter? That's been the top question coming through. Can you hear me now? I think I may have lost you.
I got it.
Okay.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you. It's fine.
Okay. I think, first of all, we all have to realize and accept and welcome that you may be a citizen of a sovereign country like the UK or the United States or any country, but we're also global citizens. And as a global citizen, 7 billion of us here crowded together on this planet. Demographers tell us that we're going to have 2 billion more people by 2050. We've got to get along. What happens in Europe, what happens in the UK is important to the United States because it affects us. What happens in the United States, I think, is important to Europeans, Asians, Africans, everybody, because we're all on this planet together. When you look at the big challenges that face mankind today, I mean, I don't think you need to go much further than take a look at this global health pandemic, the coronavirus. It knows no boundaries. We're all dealing with it. Environmental issues knows no boundaries. We're all dealing with it. The threat of nuclear proliferation, the threat of wars. We want a world where people get along, excuse me, where there are opportunities to enhance their way of living. We have common interests. You know, and after World War II, and this is the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II, the United States, the UK, other nations built a liberal world order, a world order that was based on common interests. So we built institutions that I've always referred to as coalitions of common interests, like United Nations, like the World Bank, IMF, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which is WTO, collective security, like NATO, dozens of international institutions built to promote the well-being across the globe of all countries. And what happens when you have alliances like the institutions, that everybody benefits from that. They're not perfect. They don't solve every problem. But, you know, I've often asked, what if we had not had the United Nations, the World Health Organization, all these institutions the last 75 years? Do we think the world would be safer, would be better, that there'd be more freedom, there'd be more productivity, more education? I don't think so. The first part of the 20th century was a pretty bloody part of the century. First part of the 20th century saw the bloodiest time in the history of man. And we've got to remember that. We've got to understand history. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. Still got you.
Okay. And so we don't want to repeat that. Every leader of the post-World War II era that were experienced and were brought up during World War II all of them went to their graves concerned that there'd be a World War III, that there'd be a nuclear exchange. Well, we've not had either one. Doesn't mean we can't. We've had wars, regional wars. We still have them. A lot of unfairness. We've got to rectify a lot of this. We have to work toward a better world. But I think that's where I start in answering your question, because what happens here in the U.S. does affect Europe and the UK and the world. What happens around the world affects us. The United States is a much stronger, much better country because of the liberal world order we built after World War II. That we've been enhanced by cultures, by different cultures, different languages, different religions, different people, different thinking. That's basically how the United States, and essentially how the United States was formed. And I think it adds to everybody's society when you have that opportunity, that different kinds of food, different kinds of looking at things, clothes. I think it just makes you a better person, and not just more tolerant, but more inclusive in your thinking. So let me stop there, because I think you got the understanding of what I wanted to impart. I hope you did. And it might be better for everybody if you had an opportunity to ask questions, and I'll respond as best I can. And thank you for having me on, and nice to see you again.
Yeah, no, it's good to have you back again. Thank you so much for your time and your answer. Yeah, what you said about us being global citizens, of course that matters. If you're locked in tonight and you're asking why should the US elections matter to me, you're right, Chuck Hagel, of course, because of what's going on over that side will affect us over the pond as well. So many questions coming in. Someone's asking, you previously served in the US government, and so from your experience, what is the special relationship and why does it matter? That's also been a really, really popular question. Can you break down for us the special relationship and why does it matter?
The special relationship between the UK and the United States?
Right.
Well, I think you go back to the time even before this country was formed.
I think we're just losing you, but it may just be an internet connection. Can you hear us now?
We fought a war over the independence of colonies of the United States of America.
I wonder if your connection may just be lagging a little bit, because we seem to be losing you. I can't tell if you can hear me though. Just wait for you for a second. Oh, and we've lost him. Oh, okay. Yes, he will have to reconnect. I can see my help in my chat box there. You're watching My Life, My Say with me, Swazi. And yeah, let me just bring Mete on as well, as Chuck Hagel just joins the conversation back again. But yeah, really, really exciting, isn't he? Just the information and just the experience that he's had and the special relationship conversation. Yeah, he's brilliant. I'm waiting for the answer.
Yeah, no, definitely. And, you know, it's a privilege and honor to be joined by people who are like right in the thick of it, actually, sort of like when we hear about a lot about the special relationship and, you know, we hear about these things on TV, but, you know, having people actually sort of in those rooms, running both countries is great insight. But I'm really excited. I think it's been an amazing event so far. I'm really excited to hear from some of our other speakers. We've got Marcus Roberts, who's going to be talking to us a lot about polling. You know, again, you know, who's going to win the election? What's it looking like? What are swing states? You know, where is the election won? Stephanie Young, she's already been mentioned a couple of times from When We All Vote. An amazing campaign trying to get, you know, people registered to vote in America, launched by Michelle Obama. You know, got lots of celebrities involved. So we're very lucky to be joined by Stephanie actually a week out from the election. And also we've got Matt as well. We're just waiting to be reconnected with Secretary Hagel. If he's not on the call, we may have to move on to our next speaker.
Am I on the call now?
Yeah. I think we've got you now. Or maybe I spoke too soon. Can you hear us now, Secretary Hagel?
I think maybe we can move on to Stephanie and then bring back Secretary Hagel.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah, let's do that. Secretary Hagel, if you're listening, we're coming back to you. We just want to sort out the internet issue. And then we want to get your answer on the special relationship for sure. So let me bring in the gorgeous Stephanie. Stephanie Young is joining us tonight, Chief Officer of Culture and Communications at When We All Vote. This is incredible to have you, sis. Thank you for your time. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. This has been such a great conversation. And I hope everybody is learning something and feels more informed. And I'm happy to be here with you, Swazi.
Oh, we are sorry. I don't know how you've done this with your diary, you know. I can see next week is looking chocky black. Just pack up. So how you've squeezed us in, we're so grateful. Yeah, we want to hear from you. So I'll leave the floor to you, sis. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. I've heard so many great things from colleagues, but as mentioned, I'm Stephanie. I'm from Mrs. Obama's organization, When We All Vote, a nonpartisan, nonprofit voting organization. We are on a mission to change the culture around voting and to increase voter participation in each and every election. And we really want to help to close the race and age gap. So for those who show up to the polls, we want to make sure it represents the great diversity of this country. And we also want to make sure that young people are showing up as well. And I can't tell you how excited I am. Over 1/3 of American voters have actually already voted. 18 to 29-year-olds, we're talking about 63% of them have already casted their vote, or I'm sorry, actually have said that they will definitely vote in this election. And a good number of them have already casted their vote. So we're seeing the numbers go in the right direction to ensure that this election is going to reflect really the values of all the people and not just some of the people. You know, I've heard a couple of things today that I don't want to outright reject, but I want to bring a different perspective in. I think that a lot of the issues that are moving people, especially young people, COVID obviously has played a huge impact on everything that we do in every part of our lives. Kids have missed out on their proms, their graduations, they're not going to college, they're not on their campuses, they're back at home. So everybody has really been affected. They can see how government impacts each and every area of their life. And I think that before COVID, we didn't really get a chance to see that firsthand. Nobody experienced anything that was so terrible. And I'm of the generation who actually remembers 9/11 and remembers the impact on our country. But I know a lot of these young people, the Gen Zers of the world, don't remember moments like that. They haven't seen really how government plays a role in their life each and every day. COVID has helped that, but also the violence and the police violence and the unrest that we've seen in our streets, knowing and understanding the pain of so many people, especially Black and brown people in this country, have experienced through this violence, right? And through the civil unrest. All of these issues have bubbled up, I think, into a perfect storm where you have so many people who are ready to take action and who are conscious. They're coming to realize that they are so powerful when it comes to using their voices and speaking up. And I will say this, with voter suppression, we know voter suppression is real. This country was founded on voter suppression. I think we have to be very, very, very clear about that. Considering when we came together, the first people who could actually vote were white land owning men. And that was in the late 1700s. And then eventually white women got the right to vote. And then eventually the 60s, African Americans got the right to vote. So we're not talking about, being a number of generations removed from all of these things, right? We have people in our family, in our ancestry that experienced every walk of this American life. And I think that we have to be very honest about how this country was built and how it has been created to work for some people and not to work for everyone. But that is why people like me at a young age got involved in politics, because I do believe in the promise of this country. I want to see it live out in its practice, not just be a promise, but actually practice what it promises each and every day. And that's why it's so incredibly important that young people stand up and they take their place, in their own government, figuring out where their place will be. And the first place you actually can start, at least here in the United States, is voting. One thing I'll just flag for folks, and I'd love to take questions, is that in 2016, about 100 million Americans didn't vote. So when we talk about political parties, right, we say we have Republicans, we have Democrats, we have independents. Well, that is actually the biggest political party, the people who stayed home. And why did they stay home? There's a myriad of reasons why they stayed home. But it's our job to figure that out. It's our job to ensure that they don't ever do that again. And one of the ways that we're doing that is ensuring that we're reaching people before they even are of voting age. We started a program called My School Votes, which is aiming to bring civic engagement back to schools, something that is not in schools right now. We do not talk about unless you have a great teacher in social studies who wants you to really be involved, but every kid doesn't have that opportunity. So we know it's so important to start talking about voting and civic engagement early. I believe Amy said this, but when you start voting at 18, you're more likely to become a lifelong voter. And voting is a habit that's passed down. So if your parents don't do it, if someone in your life doesn't do it, you don't see it, you might not want to be as involved. But I think that everything that's happened over the past 4 years has really empowered people to understand how important their vote is. And then also all of the great lengths in which people are going to stop Americans from voting. All of the great lengths. That just shows how powerful our votes actually are. So I'm excited to continue this conversation. I lived in South Africa for 4 years of my childhood, but I got to see the transition from apartheid to democracy. And I understand how important it is when people feel like they have the power, and the power is actually with the people. And I understand when the people leave, right, and the people are not a part of the equation, those who are in power take advantage. And I think, unfortunately, that's what's happened a lot in this country because the people have not been a part of the process. When only 47% of Americans vote in a general election, that's a problem. So it's our goal, it's our mission to make sure that we're empowering each and every American to use their voice, and we're giving them the tools and the resources to do that, so they're not out there alone and feeling as if they don't have what they need to make their voices heard. So I don't want to take too much of your time rambling on, but I would love to take questions. Just a little bit on my background too, because I'm so really honored to be on the panel with so many amazing people. I had the honor and privilege of working the last 2.5 years in the Obama White House as the Associate Communications Director, and then the Office of Public Engagement under the leadership of Valerie Jarrett. And prior to that, I worked for congressional leadership, for the Congressional Black Caucus, which is an organization of all the Black members of Congress. And I did communications for that caucus, as well as the Democratic Whip, Steny Hoyer, who is now the majority leader, where I did communications in that office, along with some other things in politics. So this has been a passion of mine, but to connect culture and politics is so incredibly important as this world has transitioned in the way in which we communicate and we engage with each other. And all of our governments are going to have to catch up to make sure that young people are at the table. So.
I know Amy's sitting behind the screen thinking, Swaz had energy, but Stephanie's got energy. Do you know what I mean? I've got so many good questions. And yeah, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for your time. We know it's a busy season, but thank you for joining us tonight. You spoke so passionately there about culture, and when culture and politics merge, and the statistics don't lie, you're seeing that so many young people are coming forward to vote, and the question that I think is really popular tonight is why is that? Is it the pandemic? Is it the civil unrest? Young people just finally really have a voice and have feet to go to the poll. You know, what is it? So you've been working really closely with young people, and let me put that question over to you. Why are young people coming out to vote this year?
Well, more than 6 million voters under the age of 30 have already cast their ballot. So that's a huge number. I think in 2016, it was only about 2 million. So you're seeing the energy there from young people. And you're right, it's COVID. COVID has impacted their lives in ways that they never expected. And it's still having an ongoing impact in their lives. Over 200,000 Americans have died. I know people who have died, right? So everybody has been impacted by this in some way, shape, or form. And they understand that it doesn't have to be this way. As you look around the world and you see all these other countries being able to handle it, I think it's a little shocking for a lot of young people to feel like you're in or supposed to be in the greatest country in the world and they can't handle a pandemic. That's not something I think any young person has been accustomed to, and that has definitely spurred people to action. I will absolutely, I can't leave out all of the police violence that we've seen over the past couple of years. Even within the Obama administration, when I worked there as a senior public engagement advisor, right before I transitioned to that job, it was Trayvon Martin, it was Michael Brown, it was Sandra Bland, it was all of these people whose lives were taken unjustifiably. And knowing, right, that this is completely wrong, young people aren't going to stand for these things anymore, and washing it away or wishing it away or hoping it away or just kind of not addressing it is not, it's just not on the table anymore. So that's why you see so many young people in the streets using their voices in a peaceful protest, which I think is so beautiful, and a way to show not just your patriotism, but your passion and your love for this country, right? Because you want to see it do and be better. But also, I think they're making the connection, right? You can't protest and not vote. So what we'd like to say is, let's go from protest to the ballot box, right? Let's not leave out that step, because you cannot create long-term sustainable change, right? Just through protesting. That is just one facet. But you have to vote. And after you vote, you have to hold these people accountable. And I think that now they're able to make some connections. So my mayor appoints my police chief. Well, I think my police chief is trash. I think he's terrible, or she's terrible. I don't want that police chief anymore. Where you have the power to vote out that mayor, right? In places like Atlanta, Georgia, where I'm from, you vote for your sheriff. If you think the sheriff is doing a horrible job, you can fire them. So I think that people are able to make those connections to how local government impacts their lives. If you live in a state where the governor doesn't believe in COVID, but your mayor does, you're walking down the street, somebody doesn't have a mask on, you have a mask on, it's nonsense. And I think that everybody can see those connections now in a way that they never could before. So what we're in right now, right? A terrible time holistically, but I do believe the silver lining is we're going to have a more informed electorate and more empowered electorate. And I really, really hope, and a part of our job is going to be to ensure that we don't take our foot off the pedal. So you can't just vote in this one election. And I think that's what Americans have experienced. They think, oh, I'll just vote this one time and it'll be done. Like Obama will fix everything, or this person will fix everything. That just doesn't happen. You have to be engaged consistently, continuously at the local level, the state level, and at the federal level. And it's going to take us educating our electorate to make sure that they understand that, meeting them where they are, and really infusing voting into our culture. And when I say culture, what I mean is in a multitude of ways. What do we look at when we watch television? What do we see and what do we hear about voting? Well, we only talk about voting on the news when you're really close to an election. You don't just talk about voting to talk about voting in this country for some reason. So how are we continuing the conversation consistently, not just in the news, but from some of our favorite television shows? I'm sure you guys probably watch Insecure. Do you watch Insecure?
Yeah.
So instead of like Molly and Issa having an argument at a coffee shop, why don't they have an argument while they're standing in line voting?
Right.
These are these moments where you can insert voting into your life, right? Into a way that just feels normal. One of the things that the LGBTQ movement did, which was really excellent, was that they were able to talk, to put storylines into the most popular television shows, unscripted shows, series, or whatever about that life, right? So that people could understand and see there's nothing different here. They love just the way that I love. And they used to call it normalized gay. Well, we got to normalize voting in a way in this country. And when we talk about political shows, you look at Scandal, which I loved, but Scandal is so far from the truth. And you look at all of these other shows about politics, and it's always twisted. It's always dark. It's always, riddled with lies and mistruths and murder and all. Like, we have to really look at how we talk about government, the representation of government, the representation of civic engagement in a way that is really permeating people's consciousness without us even having to try. So that's one thing that we absolutely have to do. And as I mentioned, in schools are so important in this process, especially if parents aren't participating, to really help to create the next citizens, informed citizens of this country. And then it's also you, everybody, every person is the most influential person in their family's life, in their friend's life. So it's up to us to have these conversations in a real way, and to be informed and educated and read about the issues that we care about most. Because at the end of the day, young people are going to be more impacted than anyone else. And you can't tell your children 20 years from now, well, it doesn't matter, I sat out. Well, that's not going to cut it, because I don't know what this world would look like if that's the case.
Yeah, so true. I've only got 5 minutes left with you, but so many questions pouring in. And I think one that I asked David earlier, and he said rightfully, look, let me send it over to the American panel. I was asking really a question around, and you brought it up so brilliantly, around voting. And for Black people, there has been a long history where that hasn't been the case, because they've been denied the right to vote. And just reading, even here in the UK, we read about you know, it had been made too hard, or it was too hard language to you know, there are so many ways in which Black people have been, you know, there's a barrier to voting. And so there is this unrest now. And you're right, loads of young people are saying, I can't take this no more. I'm not standing for this. I'm going to make my voice count and I'm going to vote. And my question to David was, okay, out of the two candidates, if we're talking about a divisive America, but we're calling it the United States, then out of the two candidates, which one for you is going to keep us going and get us to that sort of united front once again?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's very obvious. I represent a nonpartisan organization, but, you know, speaking for myself, there's only one person that's going to put us on the right path, right? And I don't even think that's rocket science. I think everybody is very clear on who that person is. But what I want to say is this country is not as divided as people think it is, right? We're just not. And I think that that's something that we like to tell ourselves, that we're divided. We're really, really not. A lot of us share a lot of the same values. What we're seeing right now is a minority of people, okay? And I cannot say that enough. A minority of people who are screaming very loudly. Yeah. And they have been allowed to lead, okay? They have been allowed to set the narrative, and it's done. Okay, so every march that you've seen, every young person standing up, not even just young people, I'm talking about people from all walks of life, every age, people of goodwill are standing up and they're making their voices heard. And I think it's so critically important to understand that in 2016, and I'm blanking on the gentleman's name who went right before me, who talked about the Electoral College, and he also talked about 2016, but basically in 2016, he talked about the country being a republic, right? And not a true democracy, considering the fact that the majority, right? Like if you vote for one person and the majority of Americans vote for one person, they don't win. But Secretary Clinton got nearly 3 million more votes, right? So we know the majority of the American people felt, like what their energy was going towards, who they wanted to lead this country. And I also mentioned 100 million people didn't vote. That is the largest vote. That is one of the largest voting blocks. So we're not as divided. What we are is we have access, and we have people who don't have access. We have opportunity, and we have people who don't have opportunity. And what I mean by that is this. If you grow up in a privileged way, in any type of privileged way, middle class, whatever, you have access to better education, right? So you're gonna be more informed, more aware. You have access to better healthcare. You have access, to more opportunities to better your life and to have a different life than your parents and generations before you did. And then you have other folks in this country who don't have access to any of those things. So they perpetuate cycles, right? Cycles of poverty, cycles of low education, cycles of pretty much no opportunities. And all of those people, how are they, who are working 9 to 5 jobs twice, right? They have 2 different shifts or whatever. How are they going to have time to see who their mayor is, to figure out who their governor is, to really jump into politics, to local politics, to sit on the school board, to have any type of say, right, in their country? They don't. So we have to make sure that we are creating a country where there's a level playing field, where everybody has that access and opportunity, so that they can tap into the voting process. They can be more informed. They can help their children reach different levels of opportunity so they can be more productive citizens in this country. And I think it's highly unfair to say that we're divided, because I absolutely completely reject that. There is a minority of people who are screaming very, very loudly, but I do believe that the majority of Americans are open, they're inclusive, they're respectful of people, and they're ready to see a change. And I think, unfortunately, we've been spoiled for so many years in this country. We haven't had to really tap in as much as we do right now. We've been able to slide by, but now it's time for everybody to step up and wake up and do their part. And we all work together in that. So I think that in order for us to see the change that we all want to see continuously, not just like 1 minute, we feel like we're going forward, the next minute we feel like we're going backwards, is that we have to ensure that the people not only representing us reflect the diversity of the country that they are representing, or the people that they're representing, but the folks who are working for them reflect the diversity of the country as well. So it's so incredibly important for administrations, for presidents' administrations to be diverse, from culture to race to, you know, ethnicity to sexual orientation, all of those things, because we're a melting pot here. And so I think a big part of the problem as well is that the way in which we've approached politics has only been for the very few and not for everybody. But when more people are sitting at the table, when more people are able to represent communities around this country, you see that reflected in the policies that are created to support each and every American, so that we all have the access and opportunity to the American dream.
And what you say there about accessibility, and I really am loving that sort of energy of, yeah, we're not as divisive as you think. When I was hearing how divided, I thought, no, hold on a minute. The point is, we want to come together. We want to be united for the change that you said we want to see. And yeah, excellent point about accessibility. I'm just going to throw it over to Mete, because I know that the work you do and the work that My Life My Say do, there's so many similarities, which is why we wanted to get you on tonight. And he has a question for you this evening.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, again, for joining us. I just had a quick question for you, and very briefly, really. I mean, I love the work that you guys do. And, you know, you spoke a lot about the work, you know, culture and politics. And I guess for one of the things that we see in the UK is that a lot of young people are passionate about issues that affect them, but they don't necessarily see traditional forms of politics as a vehicle to address the issues that they care about. And one of the things we do here is we have like a number of different engagement methods. So one of them is, for example, we work with Starbucks, and we have a project called Democracy Cafe, and it's to sort of reignite the 17th century concept of talking about politics over coffee. And we have organized them around the country, and it's sort of a cooler concept. And I've seen that, you know, there are similar things that, you know, for example, When We Will Vote is doing. So I was just wondering, in terms of your methods of engagement, what are some of the sort of the practical sort of like new and unique things that we can learn from the UK to sort of adopt to when we have elections here? Because, you know, one of the things that we have here is turnout for young people is incredibly low. It's picked up a little bit in 2017 and 19, but nowhere near the level that it should be at.
Yeah, so I'll say this, like we really try hard to reach people where they are. And what that means for us is, how are we creating narratives around voting in places that people aren't thinking about? How are we bringing different partners like you guys to the table, like Starbucks and others who reach people on a daily basis? And how are we inserting voting into those conversations? And one thing that we've done through, you know, our celebrity ambassadors, that's just one way, right, to get attention. That's not always, I think, the best method, but they have a big megaphone, and they provide an echo chamber for the work that you're trying to do and for the messages that you're trying to get across. But it's really critical that you are talking to the people that are reaching young people. You're engaging young people who are ready to be leaders, right, in their own right, and you're empowering them with information to go out and empower the world around them. One thing that we've done through our My School Votes program is that we've created a DM group. So all of these young people are sliding into the DMs in a totally different way. And they are saying, hey, are you registered to vote? And that has actually resulted in way more voter registration numbers than even our kind of random text messaging campaigns that we've done, where you text a stranger. But when you slide into a DM of someone and you're a 17-year-old or you're an 18-year-old, they're more likely to respond and say, oh no, maybe I'm not registered. Let me do this now, or I'm interested, right? So we're trying to figure out how to reach them where they are. Another way in which we do that is, you know, we've really taken over every type of platform. So from the Roots Picnic, which is a really big music festival, we partnered with them, and the entire music festival was based on voting. And every artist that got up there talked about voting, and not in a way that was stiff and weird and like did some weird speech, but rather, hey, I never voted before. I never thought it was important, but I think it's important now, and I'm gonna do it in a way that young people actually understood and could relate to, right? And I think that we've been so used to creating these PSAs that are really cookie cutter with your favorite artist, and it's not authentic, and people can read through that. We live in a reality TV world, unfortunately, right? And people are attracted to what they feel is authentic, be it authentic or not. but what they feel is authentic. So how are we reaching people through the artists, the platforms that they have, but through that authentic voice that they have as well, and to talk about voting in a way that is not self-righteous, right? For instance, Selena Gomez is one of our co-chairs for When We All Vote, and she has never voted before. And usually in politics, you say, okay, you know, we're going to vet this person. They don't have the right background, or they have, you know, something that we don't think is appropriate, so we won't put them out forward to be a spokesperson. I think that's where we kind of go wrong. And we have to make sure that we're elevating people and elevating voices that may not be typical, so that people can see themselves. So it's like the way we approach is what's authentic, what's real, where are they? Let's go there. And one other thing I'll say really, really quickly is that instead of the traditional media outlets, and I'm a comms professional, worked in political communications my entire career, but like, you know, we typically go to New York Times, Washington Post, the Associated Press, Reuters, all these places, right? I go to the Shade Room. I go to Gossip, which is Black gossip. I go to Hollywood Life. I wanted TMZ to be a partner. That is where people are getting their news from, like it or not. They're not turning on CNN and MSNBC. Those people who are, they're voting, they're focused, right? But the people who are not, the people we're trying to reach, the young people aren't watching this stuff. They're watching Love and Hip Hop. So how do we have Love and Hip Hop artists talk about voting during one of their unscripted shows? How are we reaching them really where they are and going to those media outlets that actually connect with them on a daily basis?
Yeah, amazing. You make such a good point about where are people getting their news, and let's make sure that we're featuring them at the platforms and the spaces that we're already in. Stephanie, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for all of the gems that you dropped. Yeah, we know it's a busy season, sis, and we really do wish you all the best with all the work that you're doing. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, guys.
Amazing. I'm on this high, guys. You're watching My Life, My Say's Quarantine Question Time, hosted by me, Swazi. I'm bringing in Mac next. Thank you so much for joining us, Matt. Yeah, the floor is all yours. We're so excited to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great to be here. It's been some great presentations. Very much enjoyed hearing from former Foreign Secretary Miliband and from Secretary of Defense Hagel, among others. Yeah, look, as I sit here, and I know we've been here almost 2 hours, so hopefully the audience is still paying attention and engaged. I'm sure you are, because the programming's been so great. Look, as we sit here, we're 5 days from the U.S. election, and there's a lot riding on this election for the reasons that a number of the speakers have stated. This country is divided. There's no question about it. And we're going to find out whether the country is rendering a judgment on Tuesday, November 3rd, that is decisive or not. My expectation as we sit here is that the race is going to be very, very close, that one or two states may ultimately decide who wins and who loses. If you look at the polling, it is true that Biden has an advantage. He's been up really this whole year. How much he's been up and where he's up and how much he's up in those battleground states, I think is a matter of debate. I think the race is closer than a lot of the public polling has shown. But ultimately, there's 5 or 6 states that are going to decide this election. It's going to be North Carolina. It's going to be Florida. It's going to be Georgia, Arizona. I would throw Pennsylvania and probably Michigan. I think those 6 states are almost surely going to decide this election. You know, one of the people was asking a question online, I think I responded to online earlier, about the Electoral College. And probably for folks that are watching from the UK or from around the world who don't have an Electoral College system, they're probably not totally familiar with how it works. There's a great website that makes it very easy for you to look at scenarios and see how someone can win and how someone can lose. If you go to 270-270-2TO-WIN, 272win.com, 270 is the number of electoral votes you have to win the presidency. You can look at the map, and it's got some consensus polling reflecting in the map right now to see how you get from here to there. But basically for Trump, if you take what he won last 4 years ago with the states he won last time, where I think he had 306 electoral votes. If you take the 3 Midwestern states that he flipped, that surprised everyone, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, take those 3 states and set them aside for a second. If Trump wins everything else that he won last time, then all he has to do is win any one of those 3 Midwestern states. Most likely that would be Pennsylvania. So Trump has, I think, 2 or maybe 3 direct paths to being reelected. They're narrow paths, but they're certain paths. It's holding those states, North Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Arizona, and then adding Pennsylvania. If you don't win Pennsylvania, then adding Michigan. Those are the 2 probably most specific pathways. There's a pathway, you know, not to get overly complicated here. There's a pathway where that Trump and Biden can both get to 269 electoral votes and tie. If you've ever watched House of Cards, I think the last season or the second to last season went through this scenario. It's a strange scenario. The House elects the president, the Senate elects the vice president. The House doesn't vote like they would on legislation. They vote by state delegation. So each state gets one vote. So if you have a majority Republicans, that state would presumably vote for Trump. Democrats would presumably vote for Biden. As it stands right now, there are 26 states that have Republican majorities in Congress. There are 24 states that have Democratic majorities. But it's not the current Congress, it's the new Congress. So if the Democrats were able to flip the majority in at least 3 states, or at least 2, I guess, which they could do that in Montana, they could do that in Alaska, they could do it in Pennsylvania, they may be able to do it in Florida. So they have a few ways to get there. Again, that's an unlikely scenario where it's 269. It's a little hard to imagine, but it is possible. But if you look at it, Biden has advantages. He's up in the polling. Clearly, COVID has been a real problem for Trump politically, in terms of the caseload, in terms of the deaths, the fact that we're at 225 or 230,000, whatever the exact number is, and the fact that we're coming back to another wave. It's pretty clear as the winter comes along. Yeah. Trump has an advantage on the economy. He has an advantage on the U.S. Supreme Court, and he has an advantage on the issue of crime and law and order in our cities. The issue that Biden has an advantage on is on COVID. And so the more people are voting based on COVID, the better Biden's going to do. The more they're voting on the economy, the better Trump's going to do. Just today, we saw almost double the all-time record for third quarter gross domestic product increase in the United States. It was 33% on an annualized rate. I think the previous record was 16.7 in 1950. That follows the second quarter where we had historically poor GDP growth. So we went down a very steep valley, but we're coming up also in a very steep recovery. And so look, you've had 50 or 60 million votes cast already, probably. You're going to have probably 150 to 155 million total votes cast. To me, the biggest problem Trump has is he got about 60 million votes 4 years ago. He's going to need 70, maybe 72 million to vote with third-party candidates. I don't know how he's going to get 10 or 12 million more. I could see how he could get 3 million, 5 million, maybe 7 million. Rural areas, white non-college, perhaps improving along the margin with Black men and with Hispanic men. There are pathways for him to get a larger vote turnout. 10, 12 million is really, really hard. And so the presumption among analysts is the higher the vote is in the United States, the better the chance is for Biden. We're going to see if that's true, because again, it comes down to battleground states: North Carolina, Florida, Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan. Those states are going to decide this.
I just wanted to jump in really, and I need to bring in Marcus to get his thoughts as well. But just in a minute or so, I would love to answer you this question. So many people asking this one. What makes this election so historic? What makes this election so historic? Those facts and stats you've given us is so true. And so for this year, in about a minute or so, what would you say makes this election historic?
Yeah, so look, I mean, the country's very divided. Trump's been a divisive figure, both in the United States and around the world. There's no question about that. He has a very clear direction that he wants to go, and it's very different from past presidents. So there is a lot riding on this election. You have the future of healthcare in America. You have the response to COVID. You have our economic recovery. You have huge, international organizations like NATO that are significant. You have the threat of climate change and what America and the world are going to do about it. All those issues are on the table, and it's pretty clear, as the previous speakers have said, Trump wants to go one direction, Biden wants to go another. So it's a very sharp contrast, and given the scale of the challenges the United States and the world are facing, it's a very important moment. That's why you're seeing record turnout. Trump is turning out record numbers of voters in both directions. He has very strong opposition, but also very strong support. We're going to see how it all ends up.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. That is probably the best answer for why this election is going to be so historic. Matt, thank you so much for your time and your contributions. It's been a real joy to have you on the call tonight. Thank you.
Take care. Thank you all.
Take care. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, we need to hear from Marcus Roberts, Director of International Projects at YouGov. Hi, Marcus.
Hey, Rosie. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm loving that your energy is up there with mine. It's been a fantastic conversation, and we really want to close out with hearing from you. So yeah, all over to you now.
My pleasure. Okay, a little thing about me. I grew up in America, even though I'm from Scotland originally. And then I got the privilege of working in US politics for nearly 15 years. Then I came back to the UK. I got to work with Meti for a while. And now I'm working at YouGov, which is a polling company. And I can talk you through some of the numbers about the election, if that would help.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you. We have to wrap in about 6 minutes or so. So sure, go for it.
We'll make it all work in time. Okay, let's take you to the first slide on the YouGov state of the race. we're showing that if the election were held today, Joe Biden would win 53% of the vote, Donald Trump would win 44% of the vote, and that would translate to a big win in that electoral college we were hearing about. 356 electoral college votes to Joe Biden and 182 to Donald Trump. So if the election happened right now, we think it wouldn't just be a Biden win, it'd be a big Biden win. And that's not just based on one poll, that's based on a huge amount of polling. There were 76,677 interviews that went into creating this projection. So a really big thing there. Now, if we look at the next slide, we'll see how young voters are voting so far. 18 to 29-year-olds, 66% of them are voting for Vice President Biden. 30 to 44-year-olds, 62% for Vice President Biden. And it's only actually when you go all the way up to over 65s that you finally get a majority voting for the Republicans. So the Republican vote is very much driven by the older voters. It's the older voters voting for Donald Trump, and just about everyone who's under 50 is voting for the Democrats by a clear majority at the moment. Then let's look lastly quickly at how early voting is going, because we've heard a lot about that so far. 71 million Americans have voted so far. And that compares at this point in the cycle 4 years ago with just 58 million Americans. And that early vote advantage to the Democrats is going to be really important. And we're going to have to watch really carefully to see if they hold on to it and it translates even on election day, because what's probably coming on election day itself is a very big Trump vote. And we're going to, there's going to be a contest between the early voters for the Democrats and the election day voters for Donald Trump. And we'll see which of those ends up the higher number. But at the moment, our polling is showing a big advantage to Vice President Biden.
Wow, your presentation, Marcus, thank you so much. I definitely think for so many of us who are visual as well, it's definitely helps us to kind of map out what is going on across America. And the big question, of course, is for us in the UK, looking at the US, why does this election matter so much? And we've heard from so many panelists in terms of health or police brutality or all of those decisions and why that special relationship is there between the US and the UK. But for you, in your words, why? Why should the US elections matter to so many young Brits here in the UK?
We love our friends and we love our families all over the world, regardless of borders. And when we see so much pain and suffering in America, whether it's a result of the Black Lives Matter protest this summer, whether it's about the COVID crisis, I think we all want to see America healed. We want to see America standing strong again. And so many of us, want to travel again. We want to get back across the ocean and begin seeing our friends, our family, or making new friends over there. I was hearing earlier some of the people in the chat saying they want to get involved in politics. America's a great place to learn politics, even if you're British like me. You can go, you can volunteer on a campaign, but only if we get this COVID crisis sorted. And that's one of the many reasons why we need to sort out the COVID crisis so that we can all begin having a connected world again.
Yeah. And just shouts to Mark again, who is in the chat saying, look, I want to learn and go over to the US. And you make a great point. Lots of us want to travel again. But unless we deal with COVID and the health situation very wisely, a lot of those plans aren't going to be able to get popping, right? And so, yeah, my last question really, and just to tie this all together, a little bit about your journey, maybe in a minute or so, and how young people who have a passion for politics and a passion for so many different subjects, how can they get involved? How can they start out their political journey?
They should work with groups like My Life, My Say. They should find people like myself who can help them find a way of getting into politics, like Amy Dacey, who can find a way of helping to get into politics, like so many of the panelists and so many of the friends that My Life, My Say connects to. And they should say, this is what I want to do. Help me make that real. You should start by campaigning for change in your own community. And then you should say, this is what I can offer, and this is what I can offer in other places. So reach out to us on Twitter. Reach out to us on social media and see how we can help you, but begin by helping your own community right where you live.
That's amazing. Thank you for those really strong closing words. Marcus, it's been a pleasure, Thank you so much for your presentation as well. We really, really loved enjoying that one.
Thank you so much, Farzi, and good luck to you and good luck to My Life, My Say. Take care, everyone.
Can I just say as well, before Marcus goes, Marcus, thank you so much. But for those of you who don't know, Marcus used to be my manager. So, yeah, so when we both used to work for the mayoral campaign of Sadiq Khan. So he's currently the mayor of London, and Marcus was his campaign manager in the selection process. So yeah, thank you, Marcus. We really appreciate your time.
And now I like working for you, Mede. So this has worked out really well.
Now, you've always been a big supporter of My Life, My Say, and we really appreciate the support that you've given to us and your time again today. Really, thank you so much, Marcus.
Anytime, and anyone who wants to get started in politics, work with us, reach out to us, be happy to help you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, that brings us to a close, Mete, but let us know what is going on next week, please. What can we be looking forward to?
Next week, we've got the election coverage. So what we're going to do is two parts. So we're going to have not just Zoom calls, we're also going to have some stuff on Instagram. So what we're going to do is on Tuesday and on Wednesday, we're going to be connecting with young people from the swing states and doing IG lives, Instagram lives with them. So you can follow us at My Life, My Say to be part of that and actually see what's happening on the ground. We hear a lot about swing states and how the electoral college works, but those are the states where the elections tend to be won by the presidents. And you know, Marcus and Matt spoke a lot about the statistics of the election. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect live to people there. And what we're going to do is we're going to do that in the evening of the UK time, because we know there's a time difference. So definitely do follow us at My Life, My Say. And then on the 4th of November, what we're going to do is we're going to have a special quarantine question time specifically dedicated to really looking at the outcome of the election and what's next. It's particularly in the context of the UK and the US election. Now, this project doesn't just end there. And we're working really hard with the US Embassy to make sure that, you know, we can really build this relationship between young people here and young people in the UK. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be running virtual democracy cafes from now all the way to the inauguration of the president, whether it's the new president or of the existing president. And what we're going to do is really hold smaller, intimate discussions around how we can see this relationship evolve, because we know that there's so much in common that we have. So there's so much to do. Swazi, you're amazing. We've got so many other events happening. We've got Keir Starmer coming back with a big announcement coming out tomorrow or Monday. I need to check with my team around that as well. So thank you all so much for tuning in. And Swazi, as ever, really enjoy working with you and look forward to many more of these.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all the young people who have tuned in tonight. This is My Life, My Say's Quarantine Question Time, hosted by me, Swazi, and Mete is trying to jump in. Off you go.
And just one last thing to say to you all as well, it's just to remind you all that all the views that have been expressed on this platform is of the individuals and not of the organization of My Life, My Say or its sponsors. You know, we try to promote as many non-partisan events as possible. Obviously, that can sometimes be possible or not possible. But as you will see from the event today as well, we try to encourage balanced debate. So just to let you all know about that again.
Yeah, took my line straight there. US Embassy, if you're watching, Mete's on the money for me. So thank you so much again. Next week, we've got so many events. Make sure you're looking for the 4th. Until then, thank you so much and good night. Bye.